With the Tories passing the election bill, this now opens the way for not only just Boris Johnson, but potentially any prime minister to call a general election whenever he wants. He no longer needs to go to Parliament to ask permission to do this. And this is where the worry comes in. Because right now, you have a lot of really discontent rebel MPs who have quite publicly made themselves known. Just as before, again, Boris Johnson's 2019 general election, there were many rebel Tory MPs who made themselves known about Boris Johnson's deal and, of course, their thoughts on leaving the EU and the direction of Brexit that it was going, and that we really shouldn't have, left the single market or the customs union. And Boris, back in 2019, didn't have to have a general election. As was many people made the point, this was a trap cleverly spun by, by not only Boris, but especially by Dominic Cummings, not only to get Labour into trying to fight this general election, but also so that he could rid the party of all those troublesome MPs, to which he did. Those rebel MPs had the whip stripped from them, and they were not allowed to stand as a Tory MP at that election. And the worrying thing now is that Johnson may try a very similar thing to try and save his premiership. He may go, all you guys who are against me, whip removed. Now, one of the worst things that did happen, of course, which was not brought up, was many of those MPs that were stripped of their whip last time in 2019 with a lot more of the more moderate Tories. People who were at least kept the Tory party on a somewhat sensible track. But after that, Boris shoved in more, shall we say, more right-wing libertarians, and the party was once again fractured beyond all belief. So to do this again would be, again, to get rid of those troublemakers, but would once again push out more of those moderates, which keep the Tory party somewhat in check and with reality, even though arguably it has lost all sense of reality at the moment, and would again put more and more of these crazy right-wing libertarians in. Now, would he be able to keep a majority? I don't think he would. Any current general election calculations we are seeing at the moment would put Labour on course to win with a very small majority. Probably even a coalition with the Lib Dems is certainly on the cards. That's how the predictions are going. But Boris could try it to try and save his premiership, and he could once again pull out Brexit as another key election thing. But again, it's ridiculous because, again, Boris did the last election to, quote, get Brexit done, and it makes him look completely foolish and even more incompetent if he decides to run another election to, quote, get Brexit done when he couldn't do it last time. So there are lots of dangers involved in this, and this is why a lot of the Tory rebel MPs you've heard very recently, especially over the last weekend, worry that if Johnson manages to hang on, that if the local elections are going to be bad for them, but if they're not bad enough, this doesn't get those rebel Tory MPs to give him the push. And as we've always said, it's not just about sending those letters, it's about that poll, the vote afterwards, which is a secret ballot, which you do not know how people will vote. And again, there are 84 Tory MPs who have remained very quiet over the issue of Partygate, who have not declared which way they are going to vote. Because at the moment, as you may remember, just a couple of weeks ago, we went over the numbers, and if you take out those 84, it's very, very much in balance. And it will come down to how those 84 vote. But, like I say, Boris triggering a surprise autumn general election, not beyond the realms of possibility if he thinks he can do it to save himself and, of course, rid himself of more, shall we say, troublesome, shall we say, Tory MPs. But Of course, before we go jumping into that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-up link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support my like that. And also down below, there is the link to the YouTube subscriptions thing that I have. And of course, the YouTube thank you button that we've now got as well. So on with this. This comes from The Guardian with the title of Rebel Tory MPs fear Boris Johnson could trigger an autumn general election. Rebel Conservative MPs fear Boris Johnson could gamble on a general election within months in a make-or-break bid to save his premiership. But the party chairman, Oliver Dowden, has privately dismissed this idea as electorally disastrous. One MP hoping to oust Johnson said that they are deadly serious in their belief that the Prime Minister could seek to try and win himself another term by calling a vote this autumn, especially if he manages to buy time in number 10 by winning a no-confidence vote before the summer. Some of his critics are convinced that the threshold of the 54 Tory MPs required to trigger a no-confidence vote could be crossed shortly after the further expected fines of over the Partygate scandal. And of course, a bad result in next week's local elections, or even the probable loss of the marginal Wakefield seat in this upcoming by-election. So as you can see, Johnson has a number of challenges to try and cross. But as you can see, it always comes down to, it's not just getting those letters in, it's about that vote afterwards. And there are still a lot of Tories even looking at this now thinking, yeah, we could get the letters in, but we couldn't get the votes in of that no confidence vote. And they're worried that if they fail that, then that makes all the other Tories look really bad. And considering the damage that Johnson is doing to the Conservative Party, it's really worrying. And of course, like we've said before, he is safe from a no confidence vote for over a year. So he could just go, okay, autumn election, to try and essentially save his premiership and to try and get rid of those, shall we say, or at least many of his suspected rebel MPs, to try and boot them out of the party and replace them with more amiable MPs around his faction, shall we say. However, they think that Johnson does stand a good chance of winning a vote required the support of more than 50 of his MPs, giving him at least a year's reprieve before he can face another, as we just said. One Conservative MP said that Dowden had been dampening down the speculation of an early general election by privately trying to reassure colleagues that there is no way that they could ever go to the polls when Johnson's ratings are so poor and Labour are several points ahead. But the MP has also argued that if Johnson faces a serious choice between being ousted by his own party or putting himself to a vote of the general public, that many believe he would rather choose the latter. He could try and run another anti-establishment campaign, pitching himself against MPs in Parliament. That's what we fear most, they said. And even then, that wouldn't work. Johnson could not run an anti-establishment campaign because he is the establishment at the moment. It doesn't make sense for him to run such a campaign. He has done so much stuff which has damaged his reputation and has now stationed him as one of those elitists. That is how he is perceived now by the general public. This is what we've talked about, how much Johnson and maybe the rest of Tories are just become so out of touch with the rest of society now. But there you go. He may very well try and do that. Another Tory MP who wants Johnson to go has said that there was nervousness on the backbenchers, particularly amongst the so-called red wall Tory MPs. And we talked about how worried they are. That Johnson's own self-interest and reputation as a risk-taker could lead him to bet on an election. One senior party source insisted that an autumn election was, quote, not in the working assumption, and highlighted forthcoming boundary changes which are expected to benefit the Tories and would not come into force until 2023. But they added, one thing that is always a good idea is to try and find and maintain a wide range of options. More than at least 6,800 seats in over 200 councils across Britain are up for grabs in the next week's local elections, including every seat in London, Scotland, and Wales. Both main parties are now playing down their prospects, with Labour pointing to their seats. Pointing to their strong showing, of course, last time these seats were contested in 2018, and of course the Conservatives highlighting the fact that they are trailing in national polls. Tory strategists claim they are in serious trouble in the flagship London councils on Wandsworth and Westminster. London insists that these remain unlikely targets, but do have hopes of taking Barnet in North London, which has been a mainly Tory-controlled council since it was formed in 1964, with a Labour Liberal Democrat coalition ruling between 1994 and 2002. Outside the capital, of course, the Tories do hope to try and make gains in places such as Sandwell in the West Midlands, where they took the parliamentary seats back to the 2019 election, but are well behind Labour at the council level. And we've talked about this before, about how lots of these seats that they managed to take in 2019 do have this Tory council. And of course, there is this disconnect between what the Labour local councillors are doing versus what the, shall we say, the MP is doing. There's this massive disconnect, and they constantly worry about the groundswell of action that these local councillors, these local Labour-controlled councils can run against them. So there is, again, lots of interesting plays and dynamics going on when stuff like that happens. Conservative MPs will also be watching developments in their constituencies very closely, with advances for the opposition parties, including pointing to indeed potential trouble at future general elections. A senior Tory party source played down the risk that this could translate into fresh trouble for Johnson, however, saying that it was, quote, well known at local elections can be used as a protest vote. The Liberal Democrats have also made modest gains at the disgrace of the former MP Owen Paterson in North Shropshire since the local elections, before overturning a nearly 2,300 majority to oust the Conservatives last year. Labour sources say that their number crunchers will be monitoring the council results particularly closely, at least in 50 key parliamentary seats, and the party believes it needs to gain in order to win in the next by-election, including Stevenage, Bury North and South, and Glasgow. If we have a night where we're showing all the right kind of progress in the sort of places where we need to win at the next election, that's good for us, they said, adding that Labour will also be happy if Tory MPs continue to procrastinate about Johnson's future, given his poor personal ratings. Dowden told the Conservative activists at his party spring conference in Blackpool that Johnson saw these local elections as the start of a 2-year campaign building up to the next general election. The Prime Minister told reporters en route to India of his recent trip that he intends to fully fight the next general election and could not imagine resigning over the Downing Street Party scandals. But some backbenchers are concerned that the government appears to be running out of ideas. A cabinet brainstorming session is about the cost of living early this week, resulting in very few concrete ideas aside from making MOTs too yearly, and a plan to swiftly rejected by the motorist groups, including the AA. Meanwhile, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak appeared to be flirting with the idea of a Labour policy of putting a windfall tax on energy companies this week after repeatedly rejecting it. So this, you can see just how much trouble the Tories are in. If Johnson seriously thinks about this, because this is currently the timeline this article points out, they think very quickly there could be a vote of no confidence. And we have seen, even looking at the numbers, depending on how that vote of no confidence goes, Johnson could go. That's a different timeline. But the big worry for them is that Johnson wins. He manages to hang on. That is their big worry, because if he does that, he will then go, okay, autumn general election. And even then, I don't think Johnson has a cat in hell's chance of winning and staying in. Even if they do manage to win, I think they would substantially lose their majority, because there's three ways that potential autumn election could go. One of three ways. Johnson wins, but he doesn't keep their current overwhelming majority. I do not think they will keep their majority at all. I think it will be severely, severely cut down. Will they have to go into coalition? I don't think so. But I do think they would severely lose their current majority, which would cause even further troubles for them. The other one is that Labour would win, which again I would love to see, but I do not think they would win with a big majority. Another one I potentially think could happen is that we could see a hung parliament where Labour and the Lib Dems go into a coalition government. Now, ultimately, I would certainly like to see the coalition government or the Labour win, certainly over the Tory victory. I think people have had enough of the Tories. I think the stuff that Johnson is doing, the fact that they've completely run out of steam, out of ideas, is very obvious, very evident. And again, going into a general election where you've got to put your big ideas forward about what you're going to do with the country, the Conservatives have got nothing, where at least Labour has ideas. They've been putting forward ideas of what they want to do. And even when you've got the Chancellor going, well, we might do a windfall tax. I'm not going to do it. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Oh, well, now we might. That looks very bad. You've also got the business secretary, Nadeem Zawawi, going up to these energy companies and now saying, well, energy companies, what are you going to do with all these, profits? Again, it doesn't look very good at all, because they've got no big solutions. And just yesterday, where we covered, some of those local vox pops, and one of them said exactly that they're doing nothing to fix the cost of living crisis. They're doing nothing about the energy crisis. They've got no long-term goals about what to build for the future. And as we've said multiple times before, that's not what the Tory party is about. They are about short-term wins as quickly as possible, gaining and staying in power. That is what they have been like since the Cameron years. That is what led to the Brexit referendum and Cameron putting that on the vote because he thought he was going to lose. It's just short-termism, and you cannot run a country by short-termism forever, or else you end up in the state we are now. And, we can only hope to get rid of this government, to get a better one in, and to really make some serious change in this country, because we are in desperate need of some serious change in this country. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.